10, what did we say, 10?
Yeah, about 10:15, 10:30.
Smash through it then.
I got a 10:05 alarm.
We might not.
Unreal.
We might not halve this one. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Yeah, cool.
Good.
All right. Yeah, it's fine. By the way.
You'd always get me back.
Yeah, that's it. We do get some people back sometimes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Chip Lunch podcast. Amazing to have you along with us, and amazing to have you along with us, Ethan.
Good
How
to be
are
here,
you?
Joel. I'm well. How are you?
I'm great.
That's good.
I've got a button-up shirt on.
Yeah. It's like summery vibes.
We've got similar colour jeans on today.
Yeah, I know. We're killing it.
Yeah.
I'm loving it.
Like you
20.
said, like you always make me wear pants on the podcast.
I do. I don't want to see your knees. I
wanna
love
see
you.
your
I love
knees.
you, and I love all of you, but I don't need to see your knees.
Speaking of which, the pants that our guest is wearing, very, very special.
Very special.
Dress pants.
Yeah,
yes.
love it. Love it.
Thank you for wearing pants. We
That's
appreciate
it.
it.
Yeah, that's it. What goes on behind the podcast?
Yeah, that's right. We only give a little peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, yeah.
It's my pleasure to welcome Michael Hunt to the podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Thank you, Joel.
Excellent.
Thank you, Ethan.
Welcome.
Thank you for coming on. It's such short notice too. We only met, I think, 2 weeks ago. Is
Yeah,
that right?
something like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Unreal.
Excellent. And then you came and peeked your head in last week.
Yep.
See what actually is going on here.
Yeah,
And
just
whether-
behind the scenes kind of stuff, not to see whether you're wearing pants or anything like that. But no, yeah, just interested in your workflow and how you do it and everything like that.
Right.
So yeah, appreciate that.
Well, thank you for being interested. Anyway, we're not too unprofessional, are we?
No, I don't think so.
Would you call Hudson unprofessional though?
He's so professional.
So professional.
He's the only reason we can be as professional as we are.
Oh, he makes us professional.
He makes us professional.
Oh.
You know, he's giving off that professional vibes because he's actually wearing the headphones.
He's got the
as a
headphones.
producer.
Yeah, good point. Yep,
Yeah.
that's right. He does have a microphone, but he doesn't want to talk. So, so we could just be like looking at a picture of him or something. Like
Yeah,
he's not
yeah,
actually there.
Yeah,
Just a framed picture of Hudson. R.I.P. He's here with us.
yeah. We lost Hudson to the last one. But he's...
How would you if people wanted to know who you are, Michael? What would you say?
Yeah, I'm a father, husband. I'm a pastor in a congregational church.
Yep.
One of those things I also do is, we talked a bit about this earlier, I'm El Presidente of the Big Cheese, Michael the Mighty, all that kind of things.
I like that.
No. I mean, I'm just the guy that wears the FCC stole. As Anglicans, you probably know that. The stole's that sort of scarf kind of thing. We don't normally wear that.
I
but
like the big thing.
Yeah.
So we don't see that.
We
too
also
often, do
don't.
we?
Yeah, you probably Solis probably don't see that very often,
No.
and neither do the Con guys see me wearing that very often either. But yeah, that's kind of one of the things you get that presented to you when you become the president and stuff as
Yeah,
well.
right.
So
FCC, Fellowship of Congregational Churches.
that's right.
All right,
Yep.
cool. Just if
Yeah.
anyone didn't know, that's
Yeah.
that's the acronym. Very good. Any other acronyms that you?
No,
Like
no.
Turco
Just I love a good joke. That's why I wore this
Yes.
T-shirt.
Oh,
Tell
so-
jokes periodically. Yes, I'm known as the dad pun and
Yep.
stuff along those lines. So.
What's your best dad joke then?
Oh, now you're putting me on the spot.
Oh.
Look, give me time to think about it and stuff. 'Cause,
I'm sure they'll come out.
They'll just come out. Yeah.
Can I
yeah.
tell you my dad's favourite joke? He goes, so a duck walks into a shop and says, "I'll have some lipstick, please." And they're like, "Sure, do you want to pay cash or card?" And he's like, "Just put it on my bill."
Yeah.
My dad loves that one.
Da-da.
And I'm like,
Shocking.
"God."
This is where the pads. This is
Yeah. This is where you play
Yeah.
the laugh track.
Yeah, or like beep it out or something.
Yeah.
and make it more offensive. All right, so we start with the first question.
Yes,
Ethan.
let's do that. Michael, how do you like your hot chips?
Hot chips.
You started with a where,
I did.
Where?
but it's
Where?
like how.
how. That's
Yeah,
how. I
Yeah.
said
I like my hot chips on a plate.
Yeah, that's what I like it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, in front of me
Yeah.
because it's hard to eat them behind you and stuff like
Oh,
that. you
on
know.
a plate though, not in a box.
Oh,
Mm.
I think old school. Yeah, the cup. You know the
Oh,
round cups.
yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like with the red, like
Yeah,
colour
yeah.
around-
That feels a bit nostalgic, doesn't it? You know, it's like that's how they were served. You know, like when you went to primary school and you know the canteen, you got hot chips and stuff like that.
You had hot chips at your primary school?
Yeah,
I don't know
think
if I.
so.
I don't
I
know
might
if
have been
I
high
did.
school. Might have been high school
Might
that
have been
had
high
hot
school.
chips.
We did.
I don't think I had hot chips at high school either. I'm sure people would be eating a lot more. I remember hot dogs at high school, but
We had both. Or maybe the primary. Hudson, did we have it at primary school?
So slow.
I don't think so. I didn't have it in high school either.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
I had it in high school.
so being in the Shire, they're very conscious about health, green foods, all that kinds of stuff.
I think that is. I think that's. I watched the canteens go from the unhealthy food to the healthy food,
Okay, yeah.
and it was
Yeah,
kind of
so
like
that didn't happen.
it was like running away from a wave. Like as I was kind of one step ahead of this movement of the canteens changing.
That's it, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, back in my day, they used to serve milk, No, I was just kidding.
I remember there was that thing. Yeah, but there
of
was
milk.
that thing, wasn't there? Like,
There
we
was,
need
yeah.
to make bones stronger, so everyone gets milk at recess time or
That's
something.
it. Yeah. Let's drag this back to the chips question.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, the other way of liking it is like in the UK. They do it in a cone. Just the chippy comes along and puts it in a
Yeah.
cone and everything like that.
Yeah.
But yes, I do like chicken salt, and
Winner.
I like sauce on the side.
What type of sauce?
Tomato sauce.
At least
yeah.
better than barbecue. gosh.
And when my wife and I visited Belgium, we did sort of a Love Europe trip with Operation Mobilisation in 2000. They would put mayonnaise on the side.
Oh yeah, pommes
mayonnaise on the
frites or
chips.
something.
Yeah.
I think is it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Pommes frites,
that
yes.
is that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
Salty chips with mayonnaise. is
And I
pretty
reckon mayo and tomato sauce by the side kind of also nostalgically point to that time when, you used to always buy chips at a restaurant and it was like sour cream and sweet chili sauce.
good. Yeah, with
And
wedges.
with wedges, and that was like, now we've gone up market. Instead of just normal chips, you're having, wedges with
Yeah.
sour cream and, sweet chili. So mayo and tomato sauce is kind of like the poor man's equivalent of that.
You don't mix them to make a magic sauce.
Oh, occasionally I do, yeah. And then I draw patterns on the plate. And,
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah, very important.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Our school canteen had wedges, and that was like the more expensive of the
Wow.
of the chips one.
School
So you
canteen.
get- and what they do is instead of putting the sweet chili and sour cream on the side, they just dumped it on the top.
Oh.
And so it was just an absolute mess to eat. Like it was
Sort of like nachos, basically.
exactly right. Exactly. And it was in the cup. It was in a cup and it had stuff on the top. And it was just impossible. It was impossible
Pulling it out.
to have a clean meal. It was not okay at all.
The ratio of sour cream and
Oh.
sweet chili, it was like you either had more
Yep.
sweet chili and sour cream than you had wedge,
Yep.
or
Yep.
you just had like scraping to
It,
get
it was
something.
never correct. It never lined up properly.
Never
ever.
correct.
No, it wasn't. It was they never nailed it.
Oh, look, I think the other thing is, of course, that if you move from the chips to the, potato skins, like what Sizzlers used to do.
Yep,
that
I remember.
Put fried potato skins on the side, with your steak or something. Mwah,
They're pretty
you just-
good.
Yeah.
Have you ever had?
I've
potato
never had
skins?
potato skins.
So it's more like the
Sounds
outside
excellent.
of the potato with the skin with a little bit of potato on
Yeah.
it, and then it's fried.
Yeah, so instead of peeling it off with a peeler, you probably kind of cut it with a knife.
Yeah.
So you get a bit of potato, and they're kind of tossed in oil and various spices and things like that and stuff as well. So yeah,
Strong vibes.
Yeah.
I'm here for that.
Actually,
for
I
sure.
think I remember, if you remember when Sizzler was at Miranda, like Miranda Fair, I used to eat a lot of those potato skins.
when the lines were long, that's what they do. They bring out potato skins.
Oh, nice. Okay.
To people
Or
that
the
were
cheese
waiting and
toast,
stuff.
right?
Oh, the cheese
Yeah.
toast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, there you go. Did you
Amazing.
experience Sizzler?
Not
very
the one
much?
in Miranda.
You went to the one at Hurstville?
Yeah.
Not Hurstville,
No.
Cogra.
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 Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Last
I-
one to close in Australia, I think it
Yeah.
was.
One of
think
my
you're right.
earliest
I think you're
memories
right.
of actual vomiting that I remember was
Afterwards, or
I ate so much that we went outside and like vomited off a balcony. Like it was not okay. Like it wasn't a balcony. It was
That moment of your face, that shit.
this sounds terrible.
I'm so sorry to all listening who are squeamish, but it was an excellent evening. It was like we would go at the end of the year after soccer, as like a soccer party.
Oh yeah,
And
end of season
dinner. Yep.
Yep.
And we would just absolutely ruin.
But you've gone hard on
Any
the.
hope.
I feel like you've gone hard on the self-serve.
We've gone
dessert.
hard on the self-serve, and then we've eaten more ice cream than humanly possible. And so after eating all of the food we've just eaten, the dairy
Yeah,
has not helped. And the Sizzler ice cream was that weird
it's not good.
soft serve
Yeah.
that was not very.
And then you'd have a ton of Smarties on
Oh,
it. And,
yeah.
syrup.
Yeah. You just go hard, and then it was just all over.
Yeah.
It was just stirred up nostalgia in me, Ethan, because I had a good friend, Danny, in high school.
Yep.
And we used to basically go to our local Coles sort of supermarket, collecting, sort of bottles. You get a 10-cent refund,
unreal.
Yeah.
trying to get enough money together. And a good day out was basically we'd have enough to go and buy a 4-litre tub of, like Coles vanilla ice cream and a 3-litre Coke. And we would basically get plastic spoons and eat and drink the Coke.
Wow.
And
Excellent.
we'd turn it into a big spider.
Excellent.
Yep.
And look, by the end of it, it was kind of like food fight because you're just like absolutely bloated.
Oh, yeah.
How did we think as, teenage boys that we could together get through 3 litres of Coke and 4 litres of ice
is
cream
pretty
in
good.
one sitting?
In one
That is-
sitting,
that is
that'd
a
be
lot.
very hard to do.
Yeah.
There was a challenge that would. We should probably talk about things on the actual podcast in a sec. But
We are talking about things on the actual podcast.
there was a HSP place in Rockdale that we would go to in high school.
HSP?
HSP, which is a halal snack pack.
Yep. I thought you were saying
and-
HSBC like the bank.
Oh no. Yes, we would all get our
So
suits
we'll
and
go
ties
to
on it. We would go
all
to the
together
bank
to the Hong Kong
after
bank.
school. We would no, and they served. It was like you could buy a normal one, which is just for those who don't know, it's chips and then a cut of meat and then these 3 sauces of sweet chili, garlic aioli, and barbecue sauce. And so you put all that over it, and it's an incredible experience. But at this place, they'd serve it in a pizza box.
Oh,
So they'd get a
nice.
large pizza, and they would fill that thing with those big things of food ingredients, and it was a challenge to like, all right, everyone would buy like one between 2, and you'd struggle through. And everyone would feel like, ugh, like they'd feel awful after 2. And there was one guy who every week would rock up and he'd be like, I'm going to do it this week. This week, I'm going to do it alone. And he would get
the whole thing
He'd try
himself?
and get the whole thing, and it'd be like, it was horrific to watch him try it. But he got it once,
Oh.
and it was amazing. We all cheered and celebrated. But it's this like
Yeah.
weird teenage like capacity for excessive food
That's it.
that's just quite amazing.
In competitions.
Yeah.
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 It's dangerous, as you found out.
As I found out. Yeah.
At
Yeah, Sizzler was
vomiting
Sizzler
off
was
the balcony.
yeah.
Gee whiz. That's pretty bad.
Yeah, it was like there was like a stairwell at the back, and it was the closest thing to get to.
Okay, there you go. Well, Michael, let's ask you the second question.
Yeah, because the chip question just took us everywhere imaginable.
That's great.
didn't it?
I'm all for it.
Yeah. Totally.
But the reason that we asked you to come on this podcast, or it was really Stu was saying that you should come on the podcast, is because your story of becoming a Christian is quite interesting. So,
Yep.
Michael, how did you become a Christian?
Well, I thought about whether this becomes like a 3-episode kind of podcast
Oh,
or
yeah, wow, okay.
a single episode. So I'll try and, for time's sake and brevity, try and go for the sort of the single episode kind of stuff. But my wife, my daughters have all grown up in a Christian home. Faith has been, a big part of family life. And that certainly wasn't the case for me. There were definitely people of faith within my family sort of circle. But I actually grew up in foster care. My mum had fallen in love with a man who was working in WA. That's where I'm originally from. And he was working in the mines. And as things progressed, my mum fell pregnant to him and learnt that basically he was already a married man and had a family and stuff as well. So he was originally from Adelaide, and my mum pursued him over to Adelaide, and sort of, I suppose, put the question, like what are you going to do, kind of stuff. And he basically just made a commitment to his family, and so my mum, single, pregnant, was there in Adelaide and gave birth to me and stuff. And for my mum, I think this started a kind of, I suppose, mental health crisis, we might sort of say in modern language. She was away from family. She was in a city foreign to her, didn't have those kind of support networks around. She had a baby, and, she had this broken relationship I mean, credit to my mum. It could have been very easy just to say, well, this child's not wanted. I don't want the child. I'm always just amazed at that there in that story and stuff as well. But she had me, and for 2 years attempted to raise me as a child, living there in Adelaide. But her mental health struggles were quite large, and at one stage she attempted to take her own life. And so this is where I was placed into foster care, basically. And at that stage, they tended to make a child a ward of the state until they turned 18, so it'd be under the care of the government for that stage, which is what happened for me. So my mum, as a result of her attempt to take her own life, ended up in hospital, and after a stay in hospital and recovering, she made the choice to move back to Western Australia. And so I moved out of the care of the South Australian government to the care of the West Australian government at that stage. And basically, they were looking for a foster family for me to become a part of and stuff as well. So early on, they placed me with a family. The husband and wife had a daughter, and they were looking at sort of extending the size of their family. And so for about 8 months, just before, so probably about three going on 4 kind of stuff, I lived with that family for about 8 months. And in essence, I think the couple were hoping that another child would bring fulfillment to some of their marriage problems. And at the end of the 8-month period, they actually separated. And so again, foster care stepped in and said, this isn't a place, that's going to be suitable for Michael, kind of long term and stuff. I mean, these are all things that are kind of pre my memory kind of stuff. These are just things that I've kind of been told. And I kind of have vague things of like being in a foster care home and being proud that I could get myself dressed. And so I went to bed and fully dressed, so I could wake up in the morning and stuff like that. And apparently I used to run around like a choo-choo train and sort of like make train noises and all that kind of thing and stuff as well. But yeah, again, these are a lot of memories that these are lots of facts about my life story that have been passed on to me, but I don't actually have sort of remembrances of. But I ended up moving into another foster family, a family by the name of Ainsley, that's their surname. And they were looking at kind of, I suppose, fostering children and starting to kind of care. And they had this plan that they were going to be this couple who were going to foster, hundreds, multiples of children and stuff. And so I was the first cab off the rank, basically.
Number one.
They had a son, slightly older than me, and basically just before my sort of 4th birthday, I joined that family. And in God's providence, I actually stayed part of that family or under their care until I was 17 and a half, which is when I left home to move over here to Sydney, in actual fact. For me, they're actually my parents. They're the people that I consider, and their role, while they are, they wouldn't define themselves as Christian in the way maybe I would see myself. They've been, by God's grace, a real model of what it means to be brought into a family that's not your own and stuff. So I, as I said, lived with them from the age of 4 up until I was 17 and a half. And that brought with me kind of interesting things. In primary school, people would say, "Oh, how come your mum and dad have got a different name from you?" kind of stuff. How come your brother, which is what I refer to as their older child, how come he's got a kind of different name? And I kind of have to sort of explain the story and stuff like that. I also had 5 grandparents. So I had my mum, my biological mum's grandparents. They were actually, quite significant figures in my life, particularly my grandfather. And then my foster mums, mum and dad, and then also my foster father's own mother. His father had passed away quite a number of years ago. And it was particularly her, and I'll call her Granny, because that's what we talked about. Granny used to attend the Anglican Church in Gosnells, a suburb in WA. And whenever we stayed over Granny's house on the weekend, we'd go to the 8 a.m. prayer book service and stuff like that. And so that was sort of an early introduction to me to kind of Christianity. And it was quite funny. My brother and I actually used to play church afterwards. He would get in his dressing gown, open up the prayer book there, recite all the things. He always got to be the priest. That was the funny thing. He always got to be the minister, the priest. And I was, the congregant kind of stuff. Yeah. And we'd do this, back and forward response kind of thing. Funny, that was there in the prayer book. That's so good. Like that. And I think it was just he just liked using my granny's kind of cups, the goblet. You kind of do that for kind of playing the Eucharist and stuff like that. But I think, I think at that stage, that formed for me a sense of a belief in a God, that there was a God in the universe, and that he had revealed himself in the Bible, and he was someone to be kind of revered and things. But in terms of, like a personal relationship or anything like that, that wasn't really something that formed in that circle and stuff as well. What then sort of happened is, my friend Danny that I mentioned before, Danny's mum was actually active in a local congregational church in our area. And his mum had come to faith through a friend who had been an alcoholic, and she had met Jesus, this other lady, and had been transformed. And she had a real heart for children in the local area, and so she commenced this Sunday school for the congregational church that met over in the local primary school that was nearby. And she also had these kids' holiday programs and weekly programs. Again, the kind of thing that you can't do today. It's like make milkshakes for kids, put on, party food, pies and sausage rolls and, fairy bread, and do a Bible story and, encourage them. And I got my first Bible, Good News Bible, in that setting and things along those lines. And I think that was the first time that I'd heard a sort of presentation of the gospel. And after a little while of going, she once asked our Sunday school class, if you were to die, why would God let you into heaven? And we basically sort of gave the answer, we come to Sunday school, we read our Bible, we try and do good. We're not like these other people and stuff. And I'm pretty sure, she made that clear, articulated picture of Jesus in our place, but she used an analogy that with Jesus, what happens is that he covers us, and so when we're standing there in heaven, God doesn't see us; He sees what Jesus has done for us, and effectively for me, my takeaway was, I think I need to trust Jesus. And that, I think, was that moment in my life where it moved from revering God to kind of something of a beginning of a relationship. Still very much in its kind of like embryonic kind of form and things, but just the start of something. And I could see from that point on just how sort of God watched over my life. And I think he was watching over well before then as well. It's not like, now he's turned to me. Now he's on my list, I'm watching over him. He's on the good list kind of thing. But it's all the time kind of stuff. So that started a kind of a journey of kind of exploring a bit more of Christian faith. And so I attended Sunday school along with my friend Danny, and started going along to sort of youth group, and, you know, would sort of see myself as, you know, identifying in this kind of Christian thing.
Sorry to interrupt, but how old are you at this point?
So this is my pre-teen years, yeah. So one thing that did happen was my parents wanted to encourage me in various different sort of kind of sporting things. And so there was cricket and other kinds of things. In the end, I actually took up horse riding.
Oh,
It was
Cool.
like...
a classic Australian sport.
Yeah, I know. I was the only boy in a whole group of girls and stuff like that. But yeah, I took up horse riding, and that happened on a Sunday morning. And so gradually, you know, my involvement with the Sunday school kind of sort of, you know, drifted apart and stuff along those lines. But as I came into high school, there was a really kind of sort of pivotal event in my life. Just before in actual fact, for my 13th birthday, my two friends, my brother and I, went into the city to watch a movie, to sort of celebrate my birthday. And we caught the train into the city and caught the train back. And as we got off the train and walking down the platform, my brother was ahead of me and my mates were with me and stuff. And in Perth, you actually cross physically across the tracks at ground level.
Yeah.
And what happened was that the train that we had got off was on the rail closest to us, and it went around a bend as it pulled out of the station. And by being nearest to us and being a diesel making its loud noise, it blocked our view of anything that was coming from the other direction. And just in one of those horrendous and horrible moments, it was just an express train coming through. And my brother, having been at the front of us, wanting to get across the railway tracks, just walked straight across the tracks after the train that we'd got off and pulled out of, and was hit by the express train coming through the station. And a moment that turned family and world and life upside down. I saw my brother's body further up at the platform. I saw what the impact and the injuries that he'd done. I think there was this thing of crying out to God and saying, God, could you rescue him? You know, you can do these things, a belief in that. But that wasn't God's design and his plan in that. And he passed away instantaneously, basically. And so there around my 13th birthday, we basically, the family had to prepare a funeral. And of course, no parent ever wants to, bury their own child. And there was an interesting dynamic. I'm the foster child. This is their biological son. My foster father had lost his own dad when he was 12 as a result of injuries and having been involved as a prisoner of war during the Second World War. And my father had actually come home to find that his dad had passed away from a heart attack at the age of 12. So there was all kinds of, various different layers and grief in this and things. I think it actually did result in me getting angry with God and going, well, if this is what a loving God does, then I don't actually want anything to do with him. And so I would say my early teen years were kind of a rebellion period against God, in the sense of, it wasn't just like going, oh, well, okay, I don't want anything to do with you now. What does life mean kind of stuff. But it was just a clear kind of, God's not involved. I'm on the person who's on the throne for me is me, basically. Yeah. And I think as a result of being a foster care and just personality, I was always looking for kind of like a place to fit in. I didn't always feel like I fitted in at school, you know. And I think I wanted to find a group of people who would just accept me. I think I was actually looking for unconditional love, if you like, in that sense.
It's understandable.
Yeah. You know, while my rebellion didn't take me down the kind of, you know, partying or drugs or anything else along those lines, it was just very much of like, I wanted to find my place in this world. And for me at that stage, I think imagination, desire to kind of enter into a story that I could kind of see myself as someone, was really important. So I was a big fan of, you know, watching things like Indiana Jones. Used to always pretend like, hey, I'm India, you know, here overcoming these things. I used to read a series of books called Biggles, where it's
I read a lot of Biggles.
Yeah.
Absolute quality.
That is, yeah. And
fun.
I think for me, there was a kind of image of a strong person, a man who, you know, wasn't shy of both fighting, you know, perceived evil, but also was vulnerable, you know, as much as that was, you know, appropriate in the day that those books were written and stuff. But that imagination, I think, kind of helped me. And I think with Biggles, I wanted to join the Air Force. You know, I was going to become the best fighter pilot that had ever been, you know, for Australia.
The ginger and algae.
Yeah, that's it. Yes, you know? And so, that was kind of sort of the pathway. And that involved me then applying for the Air Force cadets in it's about 14. And my mum had found a place where the Air Force cadets met, and they met midweek on a Wednesday night. And the first night that I went, I got home at 10:30, and Mum said, you need to be in bed by 9:30 kind of stuff, you know, you don't get enough sleep kind of thing. And I was absolutely shattered. I remember that. I was absolutely shattered the next day kind of thing. And she said, no, this is not going to work. You can't do that. Let's find something closer. And I don't know how it happened, but in the local community newspaper, you know, they had a little tiny postage style, you know, about yay big, article saying, Boys Brigade Company meets on a Wednesday night from 6:30 to 8:30 at this local Baptist church. And my mum said, oh, that sounds like it. How about you go along to that kind of stuff? Yeah. And so I did. And I think, again, pivotal moment, God watching over. I didn't know about Boys Brigade, never would have heard about it, but Mum saw that little article there. And so I went along and I found a community of people who you know, at least as I engaged with them, you know, it started to make me feel like these people, I won't I think use the word unconditional love, but that sense of belonging. Acceptance, yeah. Acceptance also from a boy, if I could sort of say, who always felt he grew up on the wrong side of the railway tracks and stuff as well.
Yep.
And so this community, you know, just brought me into their fold. And I started attending Sunday school because that was a requirement. And I went along kind of thinking, I know all of this God stuff, you know, I've got that down covered and stuff like that. That's all covered and things. But it was actually that sense of belonging that really captured. And I realised that in that sense of belonging, I saw people acting in ways that I wanted to act, but I couldn't. There were things that like I wanted to do and ways of behaving, but I couldn't do that. And so I longed to actually kind of sort of fit in. And I think that belonging led me to actually kind of explore the Christian story, not in a sense of how then do I belong to God's family and become part of it, going back to that relationship with him, but how do I actually act out? How do I think what I was looking for like the goodness of the gospel life without going through the gospel.
Yeah.
And God actually, in his grace and mercy, brought it back to the gospel story. And so I went along to this conference, and our church was going to this conference, and it had done for many years, and they had a bookstore there. And rather than spending my money on comic books, I decided that I wanted to read a book that could tell me how I could be part of this Christian community kind of stuff. And all these Christians, they always talked about holiness and stuff along those lines, of kind of made holiness into kind of being good, living that good life. And so I picked up a book written by a pastor called R.C. Sproul about the holiness of God.
Awesome.
And I'm kind of thinking like, this is the battle plan. This is the design book to tell me how to kind of get my life right in order. 10 steps to kind of living that kind of holy life, which was completely, if you've read the book, is completely the opposite. It's actually about how God is holy and we are not. And, told stories like Uzziah walking along and reaching out to, in the Old Testament, reaches out to the Ark of the Covenant as it's been carried back to the temple after the Philistines have had it. And he reaches out. He's not a Levite. He touches it and he's killed, because this is where the holiness of God resides. And what does it mean to be not a holy person? And I suddenly came to this realization that a holy God is a really kind of like scary thing. But as the book unpacked, I started also to see how a holy God is also a loving God. And when my brother died, I got angry with God and I said, I don't want anything to do with you. As I'm reading this story about how Jesus shows God's love to us by dying in our place, by taking on our sin, our unholiness, and exchanging his righteousness for our sins. It was almost like an audible voice for me in reading that. It was like God speaking to me and saying, Michael, I love you so much that my son died for you. And that's what a holy God does. He deals with sin, but does it in a way that is glorious and loving through his son. And for me, that was a kind of an Isaiah moment. It was like, this is the God who's done that. Well, I can't do anything but except give my whole life over to him. And so I said, here's my life, take it, use it. If you want me to go to Bible college, I'll go to Bible college. If you want me to be a missionary, I'll be a missionary. If you want me to be a pastor, I'll be a pastor. Here's my life, take it, use it. And it was, it was a transforming moment. And I think that path of walking, of going, entering into kind of like a relationship with God, that had started in sort of Sunday school, came to kind of its like fulfillment in the sense that here now Jesus was both Saviour and Lord. He was the one that deserved all of my worship and everything along those lines. And so that kind of, for me marks the moment that I became a Christian. There's a whole lot more to that and stuff. Yeah. I'm sure you got questions and things.
I was just going to say, so is that still around the age of 14?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you're still in Perth, obviously.
Yes.
So my question, I suppose, is, and like, what an amazing story, and I'm sure there's plenty more to come. But what kind of led you to choose to move to Sydney?
Oh, sorry. Actually, before we go there,
yeah, I actually want to ask what your favourite Beagles book is too.
Yes, that is also a good question. Just quickly, what's Boys Brigade?
So Boys Brigade, kind of like Scouts. Actually, Boys Brigade predates Scouts. Okay. So a guy by the name of William Alexander looked around at boys, street urchins in Edinburgh or Glasgow. I think it might have been Glasgow in actual fact. And basically he saw a need for them to, be educated, but also as a Christian man to encounter the gospel of Jesus. And so Boys Brigade, like the Sunday school movement and like Scouts, was designed for that purpose. And so, used kind of some elements of things like drill and stuff, but had as its objective this idea of producing, Christian men. And so, again, along with, the Sunday school, the church, and Boys Brigade, these were all foundational things in sort of kind of forming me and stuff. But it predates the Scouts. Yeah. Scouts actually flogged the idea of them, awesome. Even though they ended up being the larger sort of organisation and stuff like that. And there's a Girls Brigade as well. And Boys Brigade and Girls Brigade actually have a part in the story of how Amanda and I came together as well.
Well, I think let's leave that for later in the story, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, can we go with what's your favourite Biggles book?
Yeah.
I think actually, the prequel, The Boy Biggles.
Ooh,
Yeah.
they were
I
good.
haven't read that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was about his
Yeah.
growing up in
Yeah, it was
India
great.
and stuff. And I think particularly as a kid, that was the one. The standard 266, I think was the introductory one and stuff like that. But I mean, there are so many.
There are so many.
It's just, well, how can you make a favourite? It's like my wife saying, ask her what her favourite colour is when she's an artist. You can't choose. You can't choose one.
Right, okay.
Yes, yeah. But if I was going to say one that particularly resonates with me, is probably that Boy Biggles. Yeah.
I haven't read that one.
awesome.
I have read almost all of them, but I haven't read them. What's that one called?
The Boy Biggles.
The Boy Biggles.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I apologise. I thought I could be like hang with you guys on the Biggles stories, and then I don't even know that one. I do remember there's an audiobook version of Biggles in Spain, and that's really,
Yeah.
but it's like dramatized,
Yes.
Oh, that's
and
fun.
that's really, really good. I
Yeah.
can't find it anywhere. I'm
Yeah.
been trying to find it for ages, and I can't find it.
So good.
It's very disappointing.
Mm.
Yes. So my question was just, what did we say, first of all, that I like to do a part B of how you became a Christian, is what do you think changed from that moment, like that age of around 14? What changed for you? So you talked about acceptance and stuff, but what about, were you behaving in the way that you wanted to behave like the other boys were after that? Or did you start doing it?
I think I tried to start walking a path of that. And that's been, I suppose, an ongoing kind of thing. Like acceptance, we can just think of acceptance as performance. So acceptance comes on the basis of my performance.
Oh, yeah.
And if I meet the expectations of somebody, then I have their acceptance, I have their love. And this is where the message of the gospel turns things upside down. God, in his grace, while we were yet sinners, as the scriptures tell us, while we were yet far from him, he comes to us. And his acceptance, our acceptance in him, is found because of what Jesus has done, not because of the things that we've done. And actually that then becomes, I believe, the transforming thing to help us to live out that way. So once we're united with Christ, well, if we're united with Christ, we don't live the old ways and stuff. But again, scriptures clearly tell us, I think, that is a kind of a path and a process. And, we have our ups and downs and things like that. But what did change and transform for me was who I'm going to live for, who I was living for. I went from the boy who wanted to join the Air Force to the one who started putting Christian posters up on the inside of his locker and would kind of, like anyone walking by, would sort of like spin open the locker and stuff like that. I was the one that took a Michael W. Smith song for my English essay and took my Bible along and spoke about, the illustrations that we used in this particular song, such that my English teacher said, "Now, Michael, stop preaching and start," kind of thing along those lines,
Enough of the preaching.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that changed and transformed me. And certainly, while there's been time in my life where I've worked, I worked in IT, for example, for a couple of years and things like that. It was always, my life is given over to God. This is in light of what Jesus has done for me, the only, for me, reasonable thing that I could do. And so Christian service, vocational service was always there. And I kind of laughed because that thing of, I'll go to Bible college, I'll be a missionary, I'll be a pastor, all kind of happened by the time I was 30. And it's kind of like God turned around and said, well, yeah, let's do that again kind of stuff and things as well. So, yeah, it wasn't, oh, you do this and then you move on to that and then you do that. It's like, no, that's always been, that makes sense.
Yeah.
No, it's, like you said, it was a real transformation, it sounds like, which is...
Yeah.
I don't know, it's really struck me that's really cool, especially given what you'd been through prior to that already. Like, and as you said, that maybe you were looking for something to really help you understand that and where you belonged and stuff. So then you said you moved to Sydney when you were 17, though. So what happened in those?
Okay, so this is where the Girls Brigade, Boys Brigade story comes in.
Okay,
so,
cool.
So when I was at Boys Brigade, when I started, 6 weeks after sort of starting, we had a church parade service. And so the Girls Brigade company that was in the church and the Boys Brigade company that was in the church combined together for this service. And I was sitting over in one part, and there was this girl in Girls Brigade sitting over there in another part, and I could see she was kind of glancing over me and all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the service, she sent one of her friends over to kind of ask me out kind of stuff. And so I said yes, and that's Amanda, my wife.
Who is here today?
Yeah. So that's why I'm speaking so glowing. No,
just keeping an eye out.
She asked me out. And so for 2 weeks we were officially dating and everything like that. And then at the end of the 2 weeks I was dropped because I didn't call her, and I said I didn't have a number, and she said, well, there is a thing called the white pages, you know. I could have looked it up kind of stuff. Yeah. So, but do you know how many Burns there are in the white pages?
Oh, that was your name, Burns. You'd have to call them all, man.
Yeah, I know.
You were serious about it.
But then, basically, depending on who you talk to, I either spent she spent the next 3 years holding off my advances and all that kind of stuff, or I chased her. But anyhow,
sounds like you got a phone number eventually, though.
Yeah, I did eventually. Yeah, and coming into year 12, we started dating, and I said this the other day. I broke her parents' rule. She wasn't to have a boyfriend during year 12, and we started dating right from New Year's Day, the year that she was in year 12. But at that stage, our youth group leader was involved with the Bible college over here in New South Wales, and he had a choir group from that college come over and visit and tour throughout WA. And as year 12 was kind of coming to an end, both Amanda and I were kind of considering what is it that, where to do. And for both of us, independently of each other, we came to the decision that we felt God was asking us to go to Bible college.
Really?
Oh. And so we had this moment where we had to kind of break the news to each other. I believe God's telling me to leave and go. I think it was Amanda who broke the news to me first, and I was the one that sort of said, well, that's incredible.
That's my idea.
God's telling you the same thing, kind of stuff.
Well, have I got something to tell you?
Yes, that's it, yeah. My parents obviously thought that I was just chasing this girl across, that's all it was about, kind of stuff. My dad gave me about 4 weeks before I turned back around and came home and stuff. And yet 2 years later, it was wonderful for them to come across to Sydney. Beautiful. And
That's awesome.
to see, graduate and stuff as well. I know those 2 years were really formative for both of us as migrating into adulthood, being away from home, learning all of those kinds of skills, but also just for me particularly, engaging at a depth in the Bible. Amanda, having gone through a Christian home, Bible being a big part, going to Christian schools and things as well. For me, it was like, this is actually how I started to really kind of like know the story of the Bible, and how I think what had been my entry into the story of going, this story rings true, this rings authentic, this Jesus is like, well, he's better than Biggles, basically. He's the one who lays down his life for his friends. And entering into that, at that level, saw my faith and trust grow. But as I went to college, the intellectual kinds of things, how is this true? How does this hang together? All of that started to kind of come to play. And, that was extremely sort of formative. And it would have been very easy for both of us just to go into, because college was associated with a mission agency, and it would have been very easy for us to go straight from that into missionary service. But at the end of that time, and we both kind of met the criteria of, they're called Bible college, bridal college, that's where you go and, you meet your spouse. We were going out before we went then, kind of stuff. But at the end of that time we were engaged, and by the time I was 20, we were married, and 21, Amanda.
Yeah, cool.
What Bible college?
So it was out in Western Sydney. It was with a group called New Tribes Bible College.
Okay.
And the college, I think, is now part of sort of YWAM ministry or something along those lines. Yeah. But I think it was about 3 or 4 years after we went through, the college and the ministry there kind of moved and changed and stuff as well. So, yeah.
Well, you obviously were happy with the decision to move to Sydney, though.
Yeah. With that, we moved back to Perth, and my father-in-law sort of said, well, 2 things are interesting. He said, if you want to elope with my daughter, you can, but you'll need a bottle of Pepsi. What else was it?
A 4-litre ice cream container?
No. It was a 4-litre tomato sauce. I can't remember what the other one was and stuff like that. But yes, a bag of, a box of Lipton tea bags and stuff along those lines. And I think he was joking, but kind of serious, because that was a kind of a cheap way for him to get off the hook for the paying for the wedding and stuff along those lines. Yeah. But yeah, my wife is, do you want chips with your sauce kind of person and stuff like that as well. So yeah. Having a big bottle of sauce was really important and things like that. And that's way off target.
I was going to say, but like you said, you eloped. Did you get married without a big hoo-ha?
No. We got married in our church back in Perth.
Okay.
The ladies in the church put on a big afternoon tea following that. And then in Perth, there's a place called Elizabethan Village, and it's kind of done like very Shakespeare Tudor style. And so we had our wedding there, including a photo of me, like my head in the stocks, things, and Amanda sort of standing over me and things like that.
I have secured him permanently. Right, so you finished Bible college, you get married.
Yep.
What's the next?
So my father-in-law, along with that, this is a bit, the second conversation source thing. The second thing he sort of said is, I think, I mentioned about going into the mission field. Like, I was keen to go to Mongolia at one stage. I was going to, ride ponies across there and tell the gospel. Go to Greenland. Could have gone to South America. Could have gone to Africa or anything along those lines. That was it. We were going to go and do missionary service and things like that. And I think it was probably as much the adventure aspect and stuff as going and tell the gospel. So my father-in-law said, look, it sounds wonderful and grand, but I can need probably some skill, to kind of fall back on if you're going to provide for my daughter, kind of stuff. Yeah. And so that's when we came back, and both of us did some further study. I studied in IT at TAFE, and then ended up working for a computer consultancy firm for a number of years before we then went overseas with SIM to West Africa, to Niger in West Africa. Right. So, cool. So yeah, that's another big story in and of itself. Amazing. Kind of stuff. Yeah.
Well, tell us the story, because this is what this podcast is about. And,
I
know we've got a hard deadline, but we'll get you back. I
reckon.
I think that's what we'll end up doing.
Yeah, that's it. So I'd spent quite a bit of time working up in the northwest in the Pilbara. The computer consultancy firm had as one of its big clients Hammersley Iron, which is now part of Rio Tinto. And about 6 months into our marriage, I was kind of fly in, fly out up there on site. And, at that time, I kind of realised after a couple of years doing that, I was making good money, but if I felt like I was to stand before God, I didn't feel that what he wanted from me or what he desired was just for me to say, you earn a lot of money and you gave some of that to the church and to ministry. I felt like my right response was actually to be going out there and doing ministry. And so that's when we started investigating different mission agencies, talking, and we kind of wanted to do a period of time where we could go for long enough so that we could get a real kind of good in-depth understanding. So I talked about, we did a Love Europe trip with Operation Mobilisation. This is one of the sort of summer things, which is great. But you go, it's almost touristy kind of thing. You know, you're gonna get a real kind of, you know, dopamine sugar hit kind of, you know, rush kind of thing out of the moment there. But when you're long-term living in a place, you actually start to understand what it's like for people to live there long-term. And so for us, we were looking for going somewhere for a year where it would be less about being missionary tourists and more about actually entering into what it would be like to be a Christian living in another place to share the gospel and a third culture. And yet we also didn't want to just say that our year overseas was all about for us to explore that journey. We actually wanted to be able to do something that was helpful on the ground. And so, of course, having gone through a missionary college where there was lots of talk about culture and language, we knew that in a year we probably were not going to be able to be at that point. So we kind of investigated different options, and SIM approached us and had said, look, we need some teachers at this school that we run in Niger. We said, we're not qualified teachers. We said, that doesn't matter. We said, would you be happy to run the IT and teach computer classes? And Amanda with administrative skills, and she'd actually been working as a school secretary. They said, well, would you be interested in kind of helping in that part? And we did. And so, yeah, that year was teaching in that school, running a youth group. We ended up teaching subjects quite out of our area. I taught GCSE maths, year 10 maths to students. Amanda taught history, arts. I actually taught North Americans how to play cricket as well. I was the athletics teacher for a period of time and stuff like that. And yeah, again, a really kind of transforming experience. And Africa really got into our blood, to the point whereby, like Kezia, she's grown up with us telling stories about going to Belgium, going to Africa. And it's almost by osmosis, she's gone, you know, I've got to do a mission trip. You know, that's kind of like, that's what our family kind of does and stuff as well. And so, you know, that's just a beautiful thing. And she said, yeah, you've got to take me, Dad, to Africa. I want to see these places where you went and stuff as well. So, yeah. But when we came back, I think we were looking at the end of that year to go probably back long term. But we, again, God in His providence, we sort of evaluated different things. And Amanda started a Bachelor of Visual Arts, and I went back into IT for a period of time, and then basically applied for theological college. And I thought, well, if Amanda's going to be studying for her degree, work was a bit light on for me. I thought, well, I might as well apply for college. This will get my, you know, a qualification for being a pastor. And probably our trajectory was, we'll go overseas while we're young, and then when the kids are sort of like, you know, university age kind of stuff, we'll have to be back here in Australia. And by that stage, I will be able to be, you know, well equipped to be a pastor in a church and stuff along those lines. And yet God, again, just had different ideas and stuff. Yeah. And so, long story short, while working for the mission agency, promoting its work for a number of years in WA while I was a student, and after I graduated, I ended up entering into a pastoral ministry at a Baptist church, which I worked for a couple of years, then became a chaplain, and then the role at Revesby was advertised, and through the mission agency connection, a guy who I'd worked with who was based here in New South Wales, who had worked in the congregational churches, he said, look, you know, we had a chat about Revesby, and long story short, he was happy to act as a referee for me, and they extended the call to me. And since 2012, I've been at Revesby and been pastoral ministry.
Unreal.
And just to confirm, that's Revesby Congregational Church.
Revesby Congregational Church.
For everyone that's wondering.
Yep.
So I feel like we sped up there a little bit. Can I ask you one question about your mission trip, though? What's it like living in Nigeria for a year? Like, it must be so different.
So yeah, the thing that attracted us about it was that when I was working up in the Pilbara and we saw photos of the place, it reminded me of the Pilbara.
Yeah, right.
And I thought that it being a French-speaking place, we had the opportunity to go to a much more greener location in a cooler environment of the Rift Valley in Ethiopia. And we just thought, that seems too established. This seems more kind of rugged. And we also thought being in a place where you couldn't fall back on English would be good. So my 2 years of high school French got a kind of working out and stuff along those lines. It was challenging and tough. There was a level of poverty that we saw that coming back to Australia was really difficult. And I think it has shaped us. I think I can be as materialistic as anybody, and I think it's quite interesting how quickly you can have exposure to a real impoverished place, come back and just fall back into sort of those materialistic things. But I think deeply it shaped our attitude about money and about what it is that you strive for in life, and I just see in a multitude of different ways, that experience, shaped us. But there was heartache. There were children who were taken into the orphanage, and survival rates were not good. There was one little baby that was brought home by a nurse at the mission agency that was part of, and overnight the child died, and just going like, Lord, why is this? The story that God has for us about himself written in the scriptures rings authentic and true even in those moments. God is good, and his plan and his desire for this world is not going to be thwarted and stopped. And I think, interestingly, having encountered death quite a bit throughout my life, the part of the story that in the new heavens and new earth, the place where there's no more tears, no more crying, no more death, no more pain, the old order of things that's done away, knowing that that's the end, that helps you through the moments when you feel like I'm in a bit of a fog, I don't know, kind of, it's a guidance to sort of say, when Biggles in the midst of the fog and he doesn't know where the airport is and stuff along those lines, there's this guidance, this sense of, God is there with you, and at some point it will clear. God never designed us to bear the weight of things in which we could never really understand because we're not him. We don't have all of the pieces and everything else along those lines.
When you came back from Niger, and the reason I ask this question is there's Anthony and Trudy who, from our church, they've just gone to Ethiopia for, I think it might be the third time. And they said that when they came back from Ethiopia the other times, Anthony especially said that it was really hard to see that the difference between the kind of socioeconomic conditions. How did you guys go when you came back?
Yeah, challenging. I have a vivid memory. So supermarkets, you wouldn't even really call supermarkets like, if you could imagine a workshop on a farm or in a really small country town where it is literally just pieces of corrugation over a kind of like a frame and, bare floor and, maybe some things up kind of stuff, that's what was counted as like a supermarket kind of stuff. And, we would go there and you'd get your basics and your produce and things along those lines. But there was nothing like the Westfield kind of thing. And when we came back, we visited the Westfields sort of shopping centre over in WA, and it's like marble floors, it's glistening and everything else along those lines. And I had this vivid memory of this young girl coming up and seeing this jacket on the rack, and it reminded me of something like someone from the 60s or 70s would wear. It was so gaudy, and it like had $200 on the price tag or something along those lines. I couldn't think, like if someone paid me $1 to buy it from the op shop, I still wouldn't take it, kind of stuff. It was, and then that's my personal taste and everything along those lines. But I just couldn't see that it was worth what the price tag was. And here's this young girl just runs up and grabs it. I must have this kind of thing. And there's my brain doing the calculations. Yeah, $200 is the average of what someone in Niger would live off for the whole year. And here's this, aspect. And again, nothing wrong with necessarily wanting or kind of desiring those things. It just was really challenging. And it's still, it's challenging as you kind of think about it, and even now, because I may not want the $200 gaudy kind of, jacket, but there's certainly other things that I want that, I like that and stuff. And do I think about, God's economics in the same way? Do I think about how it is that God wants me to use the resources and the things that He has given me? And look, I think missionaries can easily go through this kind of everyone needs to live an impoverished life like everybody, like so much of the rest of the world, and then find it challenging to integrate into their own culture, and yet also realise that, we have been given different privileges or honours or gifts, or God's shown His grace in different measure and stuff along those lines. Again, our worth and our acceptance in God is not that, well, I've abandoned everything to become, an impoverished person. The Christian life looks like me following in the footsteps of Mother Teresa, renouncing all and having that kind of monkish kind of life. To actually know, in all that God has given us, having a relationship with Jesus, how are we then shaped by that? And how is that shaped by our worship? And if God blesses us with gifts and we use them, to go to the bar, to go to the restaurant and buy the wedges and sour cream, and to splurge a little bit and stuff along those lines. Yeah, God loves, He provided for His people a land flowing with milk and honey. So it's not beyond God's design for that. But if my worship is all around those material things, well, I'm missing the God who's providing that. I'm starting to worship, as we would say in theological language, I'm worshipping the creation rather than the Creator who made it all. Yeah.
And going on that missionary trip highlighted that more for you?
Yeah. Really, I mean, you're confronted with poverty.
Yeah.
Deeply confronted with poverty. Deeply confronted with what it means. And in a way, people in Africa were a lot more present and personable in their families.
Interesting. Yeah.
Very much we can have all of the materialistic things, but be totally unhappy in all of that stuff. And in a way, that's where exposure to another culture kind of helps us to see some of those blind spots. Now, without Christ there in that culture, those things can then also be turned into ways whereby they still miss the point of who it is that's made them and who they are to worship.
Yeah. How's your French? Is it pretty good?
Oh, look, it was better than my wife's. She once introduced herself as a kilo of beef.
Nice.
I love
mixing up. I would like. Yes. So I never let her live that one down and stuff along those lines.
That's a good one though. That's funny.
Yes. Yeah.
I like it when they do that in movies.
Yeah.
And they're like reading a phrase book, and they're like, I am a kilo of beef. I thought, they put like the
subtitles underneath.
I always
and
think
stuff
that's really
along
funny
those
joke.
lines. Yeah. But look, I made many, faux pas and stuff along those lines. So, I don't just want to kind of like highlight hers and stuff along those lines. Yeah. But I know I'm not going to win any award for French translation or anything else along those lines and stuff like that.
But a year of it must.
But most of it was still in the school, so we were, English was still there predominant and stuff along those lines. So it was only when we went out sort of into the community and stuff, and if I would say it was immersion, but not, because we had a safety net, around us and stuff along those lines. Yeah,
right. Well, we should move back to where you're saying that you accepted the role at Revesby Congregational Church, and you've been there since 2012.
Yep.
Which, what does that make it? 12?
Yeah.
About 12 years?
Yep.
So that's your one and only kind of ministry job. What has God taught you through those 12 years of when you first started to now as you're well established, obviously?
Yeah, so I think there was a bit of grief about not going to the mission field, and that not happening. And then God placing me in Revesby and in Bankstown in one of sort of, like the most multicultural areas of Southwest Sydney. Yeah. And so I just realised like there's a whole mission field on our doorsteps. Interestingly, God has had me in my ministry do a lot of work in conducting funerals. And so one of the things I suppose I've learned is both about grief, how grief affects us. God has drawn out of me a kind of more, I suppose, chaplaincy pastoral side in that ministry.
You've also experienced that in a very real way yourself.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Empathy can often come out in people who have been through. Not everyone, as a result of trauma, becomes empathetic to the same degree, but when someone feels that they can kind of relate and kind of understand, and everyone's grief is different. Everyone's story and circumstances is different. It does appear that for my time in ministry at Revesby, that's an area that God has used and stuff as well. Right. Yeah,
that's really interesting. Can you tell me more about that though? Because so you obviously have to do a lot of funerals, which is quite a sad time. How have you seen the outworking of having that chaplaincy side throughout those years?
Yeah, I mean, it's twofold. I think I'm able to enter into people's story. I have a way of relating to people, and hearing their stories, I'm able to kind of draw out things or honour things that may be about their loved one. I think also, rather than just kind of coming to it as this is a service and, these are the things that we've got to do. What's pastorally is happening here? What is the purpose of this service, this occasion, my meeting with them? What ways maybe can I, even if these people are not explicitly Christian, bring Jesus to the table for them, and talk about, that kind of pastoral, that hope, that bigger story and stuff as well. I think being the kind of person who wears their heart on their sleeve also helps when there are people that are grieving as well. And so what God has done in that ministry space is allowed me to be able to be a safe person for them and give them a kind of confidence. And theologically we talk about sometimes a non-anxious presence. And at a time when people are really kind of struggling, where the adrenaline's kind of kicking in, where grief is working all of its things out, coming in and going, we've got this, we go through this process, really does help people and stuff as well. Yeah.
And how does that go, being in a, like you said, a multicultural area of Southwest Sydney? There's obviously a number of different faiths in that area. How does that chaplaincy work and that idea of being part of other people's story, does that translate into people you would not expect being interested in Jesus?
Yeah, I would say our world and community today, people are longing to be think of a bigger story, and often there's also a nostalgia. Yeah, my grandmother or my mother or family member, they once were part of a kind of like a Christian community. It was important. They met maybe in a church. They got married in a church, so they were involved in this way and stuff. And so coming in helps them. My coming in helps them to be able to not only reflect on that as part of their loved one's story, but maybe also kind of sort of see that. And I think eternity, our own mortality, comes to the forefront when someone we care for, their time amongst us has come to an end, and so there is an opportunity to talk about that.
Questions.
Yeah. But I always do that in the sense of I'm being given the privilege, and I try and take a kind of a lead from where people, the kinds of questions that they're asking and stuff. So sometimes I just kind of like drop a little bit of a Christian morsel and see whether they pick it up.
What's that?
What's your go-to morsel?
Well, look, I talk about seasons of life. Ecclesiastes 3, for example. Okay. Life has its seasons. There is a time to weep. There is a time to mourn. There is a time to laugh. There is a time to dance. Weeping and laughing, mourning and dancing. And I said, look, as they talk with me about their loved one and they share those things, I said, wonderful, you've told me about this, and I relate that back and stuff. And I just also want you to know that because of that, it's okay. It's okay to feel the sadness and weight of that, And I might sort of say something along the lines of, as a person of faith, I just find that life doesn't just have its seasons, a circle, if you like, but it does have an end story. And that's where I'll often go, refrain. There is a place where there's no more tears, no more crying, no more death, no more pain. The old order of things has passed away. Or I might say, there's a Psalm 121, God watches over, he watches over Israel. He does not slumber or sleep. If God watches over and watches out in our lives, and I might pull different things from them, then for his people, he has a place waiting for them, and sometimes that sparks conversations, sometimes, just leave a morsel there for people to ponder about and stuff as well. Yeah.
I like that. I mean, that's really helpful for me.
It's really cool
to think about when talking about Jesus. So we come out to the time where you need to head off, which is, I think you're in agreement, Ethan. We'll get you back to continue the story.
I am in agreement.
Yeah. You are in agreement.
So much agreement. Look at all the agreements.
What an agreeable face you have.
That's me.
But it's been wonderful having you on so far.
But
I will leave that on the cliffhanger. As we keep saying at the moment. It's been great having you on. So thanks for coming and sharing.
It's been awesome.
It's one of my favourite things about doing this podcast is hearing people genuinely and authentically share just how Jesus has worked in their life. And you've gone through a lot of things already, that, as we've heard, especially in the first part of your life, that have really shaped you. But God has always been there. I think that's where a lot of the things that you've been saying, God has always been taking care of you, which is awesome. And it's always a massive encouragement to other people to be hearing that as well.
Yep.
But we'll continue doing that.
We will.
This is part one.
Yes. Yeah.
But we'll wrap this up. We'll wrap these chips up.
Yeah.
And we'll be back with Michael at some point.
Looking forward to it.
In a couple of weeks, probably.
Yeah.
But good. Thank you very much, and we'll be back. We always finish our podcast with a one-way.
Okay.
So we'll do that, and we'll see you soon.
All right.
One way.